I want to move on now to a sensitive topic this evening, and it's one which you've been writing about, Terry, and that is calls for legalised assisted death, essentially to have the conversation. Where is Ireland at with that conversation?
Ireland is in a truly weird position in relation to this conversation, because for some time, for 10 years really, we have had the example of Marie Fleming, who was desperately ill, desperately hampered by being ill, and who decided to go to court to vindicate her right to die in a time of her own choosing, in a way of her own choosing. And because her problem was that, like many other people with a disability, any of the rest of us can decide to terminate our lives at any point we want to. It is regarded as a basic human right. Now, it's not something that we want to promote, but it isn't illegal anymore. However, if you have a neurological disease or have had a stroke, for example, and you want to end your life, but let's say you can't swallow, or you can't reach the means of ending your life, that basic human right is taken away from you. Marie Fleming went to court, she fought the law, and the law won. It won 10 years ago, and at the time many politicians said, OK, the law is wrong and we have to change it, and Jean O'Kenny has given leadership in this. But the weird thing is, I have seen in 50 years of working with politics, consensus building on issues, and consensus invariably leads to action, except in this case. There is huge consensus and no action, and I don't know why.
John, specifically you're campaigning for this because you want that choice. When you're at that point, you want to make the decision about, assisted dying, and to have that, you call it dying with dignity. In this country at the moment, you don't believe that that exists?
I believe it exists for many people, but there are also many others that, despite the intervention of palliative care services in this country, which I avail of myself, and I have to say are absolutely superb. Despite their best efforts, some people still suffer. Some people have to watch terminal patients suffer. And yes, I absolutely agree with the right to choose. I think it's a conversation that Ireland is ready to have. But on saying that, we have to bring everyone into the conversation. And with regards to the Special Oireachtas Committee, that was referred as a result of the Justice Committee that James was chairperson of, I think it's absolutely critical that that Special Oireachtas Committee is established. And what's the delay? I would ask James here tonight. What is the delay?
John's saying, and Terry's alluded to as well, Ireland is actually ready for this conversation, but the conversation is not happening.
Yeah,
Why not?
I agree. I voted for this in the Dáil. There was a free vote amongst my party anyway. I voted for it. I believe in the principle. Jean O'Kenny introduced a private members bill, which, as chair of the Justice Committee, we considered. We did as much as we could with the bill. The bill was very well intentioned.
I just want to get onto the nub of this because that there was going to be a separate special committee to talk about this. That was in July of last year. Nothing's happened.
I don't create Oireachtas committees, neither does anyone around this table. So it's a function of the Oireachtas.
But is it a lack of political appetite around it?
Well, if it is, it's one cross-party based around the Oireachtas. But just to take you back to where it's at, so we considered a piece of legislation that Jean O'Kenny tabled. Good piece of legislation in terms of spirit, but not in terms of detail. It wasn't fit for purpose. We said there should be a special committee convened for this. Where that sits is the Business Committee, which is a cross-party committee within the Oireachtas.
Right.
They currently have a Surrogacy Committee, a Gender Equality Committee, and an Autism Committee.
It just hasn't happened. You're talking about all these committees.
Sorry,
I know, but it is just...
So there's only bandwidth within the system for a couple of committees at once. I'm told that committee will be established in around Christmas.
All right. OK, Peadar, I just want to get...
to government. It's a Oireachtas
Peadar, to get your view on it. Not everyone is in agreement that this, assisted dying should be happening in this country. But
so internationally, it's an outlier that countries provide for assisted suicide or euthanasia. So there's far fewer countries that provide it. A lot of progressive Nordic countries don't provide it. And the reason they don't provide it is because there's a lot of unintended consequences that come from it when it's legalised. So in countries like Canada or the Netherlands or, let's say, Belgium, the numbers radically increase in terms of the people who use it to die. So it's brought in for the purpose of really difficult cases, but 1 in 20 deaths now in Belgium are through assisted suicide. And indeed, it's now available for children, it's available for non-terminal illnesses.
Children who are terminally ill.
No, it's available in these countries for non-terminal illnesses and for mental health.
Your
issues.
take on that, because you're one of 5,000 people
Yeah.
who have petitioned the
Peadar,
government on
with
this.
respect, we need to compare like with like. And what we're looking for here is legislation that would provide for those of us, not just those of us with a terminal illness, but those of us that where death is inevitable. And if I may, there's a very good friend of mine that passed 6 months ago today, and his name is Brian Lynch. He wrote an article, he was interviewed in the Irish Times last year, and in it he said, legislation is not about giving definite instruction on how to die, but would offer terminally ill people an alternative to unnecessary suffering.
Can I just,
That's what we're talking about.
Very briefly, in countries that have introduced it, such as Oregon, 50% of the people who have decided to take assisted suicide have taken it themselves because they feel that they're a burden on people. It puts pressure on people with disabilities. Disability organisations oppose this in Britain. The Palliative Care Association of Medics in Ireland oppose it. 80% of
the issue is
the consultants themselves
all
oppose
of
it.
this
They're not.
needs to be
These are the people who
dealt
work
with in a
with.
Dáil committee,
All right.
and nobody is urgently setting out to set
Okay.
that up.
Yeah, it's just I do think we need to listen to the clinicians who work in palliative care, and 80% of them have said they absolutely oppose the introduction of assisted suicide and euthanasia in this country.
And what are their concerns,
And the
Peadar?
major concerns is, so I mentioned the issue of a burden. So 50% of people in Oregon said that the reason that they chose assisted suicide is because they feel that they are a burden on their families or on society. So in other words, that feeling has emanated because now there is a choice that they should be making this choice if they were really looking after the best interests of their family, if you understand. People with disabilities, Disability UK is the biggest organisation in Britain who supports people with disabilities. And they say that it would put an unfair pressure on some people with disabilities if this law was there, because they would feel the need then that they might choose that. And they said it was an illusory choice. And actually what we need to be looking at is assisted living. There
is end-of-life care on that.
Just one final point if I can. There's parts, like in Canada, for example,
we're running out of time. I want to just get John in on that briefly, John.
Assisted living. I hear this discussion all the time about life, about pro-life. I and people like me with a terminal illness fight with every fibre of my being to stay alive, to prolong my life. And to suggest it's about anything other than living is wrong, and the language used is absolutely critical. You mentioned suicide several times. This is dying with dignity, assisted dying, and to introduce suicide, euthanasia, I think it's very deliberate, and it's not very helpful.
Can I just come back to this? This is the dictionary definition of a person ending their life is suicide, and it's important that we're straight with people in terms of the language we use. Euphemisms shouldn't be used in this situation. The truth of the matter is,
it's not necessarily a euphemism to describe something as dying with dignity.
No,
that is the phrase chosen by people like Vicky Phelan and others who are right up against the sharp end of it. It's not, Peadar, with respect, it isn't that they're using euphemisms. They're using the language that fits their situation. We can use whatever.
Using the dictionary language.
That's fine.
Okay.
Use the dictionary language.
And I'm entitled to use that language.
But dictionaries don't tend to have much in the way of a heart.
Dictionaries don't have answers.
The fact is that directly after I wrote the column in the Irish Examiner, I got a storm of comment. But one of the lengthy comments was from a doctor. And he had major reservations that Peadar would agree with, and he had reservations about the capacity of the health system to cope with this. But that's not the point. This is not the stage where we can engage in that conversation. The conversation needs to be had in the Oireachtas, at least in the beginning.
And certainly we will be returning to this again, because we can see that it does generate a lot of debate, a lot of commentary, and it should be on the political stage as well. My thanks to you, John, for joining us tonight and telling us your story and why it is so important for you that something is done about this.